only for 2 days, and then it's going to get warm again, thank goodness. So let me just run through the plan here. Today I'm going to look at some of the information in Chapter 2. Now Chapter 2 is quite important, I think, for you to really pay attention to. And last semester I did this in 2 days, so I'm going to be skipping a lot of the slides today because I particularly want to look at the mental health and suicide information for a number of reasons. One, I think, given our circumstances, that understanding mental health and understanding that not everybody might be managing this is important. And two, the suicide rate on campuses around the country is sadly quite high. So I'd like to kind of cover that information just so that you're aware. But on next week, try either between now and Friday or over the weekend, try to read this chapter quite thoroughly, because it's chock full of information that is, I think, very important, particularly if you're going to stay in this part of the country. Native Americans have a very high mental health and substance abuse problem on the reservations. And if you're going to be working around here, then that's something you may be having to manage within your career. So yeah, I think just try to pay close attention to this chapter as we move forward. Now on Friday, Chief Malden is going to come here to the classroom and meet me here, and he's going to give us some information on self-defense that we should have had last week to go with the violence chapter, but I had to flip-flop those because he wasn't available. All right, so if you can dial in live, I'm not quite sure whether he is going to give us something we can personally do as an activity. Usually he does. We meet him in the dance room and he teaches us a couple of particularly useful counterattacks, but I'm not quite sure how he's planning this session for online. So we'll see how that goes Friday. Then next week we'll do a different chapter, and then on Wednesday you have a choice. If you look at the syllabus closely, on Wednesday you have a choice between doing the work on the chapter of next week or doing the work on chapter 2, okay, one or the other. So I think that's all I wanted to start with. So let's get going on this info. And please do jump in, you know, if you've got comments or questions, or you have an experience that you can share. As I said, this is not a content class, this is really a lifestyle class, and so, you know, the more interaction we have, the more we all will get from this, okay? All right, so I just want to point out that I put up a new Chapter 2 combined, and on the header slide is the link to counseling services on campus. So if you or anyone you know needs help, or you are worried for someone, for a friend or someone that you know, then they have some great resources to help you with those problems. Okay, don't try to manage things on your own, especially now, during this time. All right, get help. So I just wanted to point out the initial intro to the chapter, because I think this is not something we always consider when we're thinking about psychological or mental health. That if we're truly going to understand what's going on psychologically, then we have to understand a little bit about the physiology of the nervous system. Okay? Because our cognitive processes, you know, my thinking, my decision making, my memory, all rely on the functioning of our central nervous system. And when we look at how we express emotions, or how the neurotransmitters impact our mood, then again, we need to understand the central and the peripheral nervous system. The picture I have here is a real nervous system that was taken from a body. If you ever get the chance to go to the body or one of those other touring setups where they have actual bodies, you have to kind of get over that, oh, these were real people, but remember, they're not people now, right? They're bodies. But it is truly eye-opening. It's one of the most impressive things from a movement point of view to see how the body actually looks and is put together. Because when we look at pictures in books, it doesn't really look like that. Okay? So what we've got to be thinking about is, can we express our emotions appropriately? Do we have the tools and the understanding, the recognition of the emotion? What kind of role does our personality play? Now I'm going to skip personality, but just to let you know that there are several links. There's one in the PowerPoint, and there are some on the blackboard to very simple Myers-Briggs personality test, which is something that's used quite widely in the working world. There's a lot of controversy over the Myers-Briggs test. You can read articles and blogs and pieces that say this is very valid. We have backup information to show that it really does indicate someone's personality type. And then there are other arguments that say, you know, that these people that created this test weren't doctors, they weren't scientists, they had no training, and there's no real foundation for the test. But it's quite a fun thing to do. It's quite interesting, I think, to play through. Particularly the link in the PowerPoint does a little kind of cartoony test with you, and you can highlight your characteristics and put those together. So that's there if you want to. So characteristics of psychologically healthy people. So sit back for a minute and be truly honest with yourself when you look at this table, all right? Because psychologically healthy people are able to manage situations that psychologically unhealthy people struggle with and often resort to some kind of substance abuse or violence, right? So psychologically healthy people accept themselves, right? Desire privacy. Respond to changing situations with spontaneity. Oh no. No. I don't claim to be psychologically healthy, I have to say, right? I do not do well with change, right? I don't do well with something that isn't planned. I'm not very spontaneous at all. I really struggle with that idea of just getting up in the morning and going, oh, let's go do this. I needed to have planned it for a few days, right? So look at that list and be honest with yourself about, do I meet the majority of these characteristics or not? Do I resort to some kind of substance abuse to manage stress, for example, right? So, me, wine and ice cream, that's my substance abuse, right? So, and remember back to our model in chapter 1 that my mental health can influence other components of my health because according to that model, everything overlaps, right? Okay, so there's the link to the Myers-Briggs if you want to have a try. It's only about 3.5 minutes long. It's not going to take up much of your time, but it's quite interesting. There's another link here. So look closely at Maslow's hierarchy because this is quite an interesting theory. Because Maslow is saying that in order to be truly happy or to be truly content, that we have to have all these things that are in the pyramid, and we have to go up the pyramid to reach the top. It's not like we can just jump in anywhere. We have to meet each level. All right, so we have to have our physiological needs met first of all. We have to be warm, we have to be fed, we have to be watered, right? We've got to feel safe. Well, that's a big one because if I'm living in a house with someone who's abusing me, then I already can't meet level 2, right? We have to be able to give and receive love, right? We need to have a level of self-esteem. So my image of myself has to be quite positive, okay? And then if we can manage all of those, we get to what he calls self-actualization, which is the need for achievement, right? And mastery of skills and situations, okay? So it runs from the most basic to something that is important for psychological fulfillment, all right? So I think that's quite a useful approach to thinking about it. And I have a link here, this one's about 4 minutes, that talks about self-actualization within education. So it's quite, especially if you want to perhaps be a teacher, but maybe even for yourself within your own education, that link might be useful. Okay, I'm going to skip adjustment and growth. Make sure you read through this carefully. One important thing about self-esteem, which I'm not sure is in the chapter, but we also cover self-esteem in motor behavior. So I just, in case you don't come and take motor behavior with me, I just wanted to point this out. That when you're talking about self-esteem, so how I feel about myself, how confident I am, or do I think I'm competent at a particular skill, right? That my belief in that self-evaluation is more important to my self-esteem than whether or not I'm accurate in that self-evaluation, okay? So that can sometimes be difficult to watch from the outside. If you have a friend or a family member, or even yourself, if you can understand this to be kinder to yourself. But if you're watching someone else struggle with their self-esteem, it's very difficult because you want to step in and go, no, you're really great at this, it's going to be okay. The problem is, unless they believe that, it doesn't impact their self-esteem, right? So the best way to help is to provide an environment or a situation where they can start to be successful. And the more success they have, the more they start to realize that they can do it. And so the belief starts to match the accuracy of the self-evaluation. Okay? So I just wanted to point that out, just in case you don't come join me in, it's not 212 now, it's 2170. Because I think that's quite an important idea to take on board. Okay, remember our model, there's our model. Improving let's go back a little bit. Improving psychological health. All right, so remember, because they overlap, that other lifestyle activities can impact my mental health. So if I don't exercise and I have mental health issues, then I'm not using a strategy that has been shown to benefit people with mental health issues, right? So if we exercise regularly, it allows us some space to begin with for ourselves, right? And there's also a lot of physiological results of exercising that can benefit your mood and your brain chemistry, right? We have to sleep enough, which often as students we don't do, right? And we've got to eat well. It's got to be nutritious. We don't want to be eating McDoo-doos every day or pot noodle every day. That's not a good way to take care of this vehicle that you have. Okay. All right. So keep paying attention to the model that everything is important, right? If I improve other components of my life, if I improve my social well-being, right? So maybe I go and join a book club so that I can interact with people over something that we've enjoyed reading. Or I go to the gym and I socialize with people at the gym, right? That could help. I've got to take care of my spiritual needs, right? And that's a wide-ranging domain, because it doesn't necessarily, spiritual doesn't have to be religious, right? It can be, but it doesn't have to be. So if I'm not religious and I don't have church, or take your pick, whatever your options are, right? Then how do I fulfill this idea of my spiritual need, right? Because it all comes together. If I can improve any of these because they overlap, then I can improve that big psychological portion. Any questions, comments, experiences? No? Are you all sitting there going, this isn't me? Or are you all sitting there going, oh my God, I'm recognizing things? Right? Okay, so let's try to get a little bit more understanding about this idea of psychological illness or mental illness, because until very recently, it's been kind of hidden away. It's not something people have admitted to, sometimes not even to themselves. it's not been socially acceptable to just say, oh, you know, I have a problem. That it's been not understood, like, how do I manage it? What's this going to involve? Are they going to lock me away in a loony bin? Because it's not that long ago that that's exactly what happened, right? Even as late as the 1950s and into the 1960s, people were being locked away in a mental institute if they were psychologically unwell. When, you know, they weren't crazy, they were just not healthy, right? So there's been a huge social stigma for a long, long time about the idea of mental health, okay? So there's a difference between being healthy and having some unpleasant thoughts or feelings, or being mad, or occasionally being inappropriate, right, or thinking something really ugly about something, right? That doesn't make you mentally ill, okay? All healthy people have these fluctuations in mood and thoughts, right? It's the ability to express the emotion, right, that starts to show what the problem is. So if I'm actually mentally ill, then the feelings that I have are just not normal. They don't go away, right? They persist. Every day you get up and it's still there. And you go to bed and it's still there. And you get up and it's still there, right? That isn't typical of someone who's healthy. I'm mad, I go to bed, I get up, I'm over it, right? Or I'm sad, I get up, I'm over it. But if I have mental health issues, that might not be the case. These feelings persist over time, and then I can't manage them, right? They start to interfere with what I can and cannot do during the day. So it might interfere with your relationship with your family. It might interfere with your ability to do your work completely, right? So then you could end up being at risk of losing your job. And it's looking at what are the responses, what's the emotional response to the feeling, right? So sometimes these thoughts are very disorganized and kind of haphazard. Some people will actually experience delusions, right? So healthy versus unhealthy, right? Again, I think it's important to understand the difference, because no one's saying that if you're psychologically healthy, that means you don't ever do anything daft, right? Or you don't say something you shouldn't say, okay? So again, occasional unpleasant feelings, right? I really hate that person, right? Does that go on throughout my whole life? No, right? I just put it away, right? So mostly normal or adapted response to something that you feel threatened by, all right? But for an unhealthy person, these abnormal feelings don't go away. They just persist day after day, and the adjustment to that feeling doesn't occur, which is why it's important to read that bit about psychological growth and psychological adjustment, okay? Given a reasonable amount of time for someone who's healthy, those strong emotions might dissipate. So let's think of something that makes us very sad. Let's say my dog dies, right? And that and I'm like bawling my eyes out and crying and I'm sad and I'm looking at photos and missing the dog and it's just awful. But it's awful if I'm healthy for a relatively short period of time. I mean, it's different obviously for every person. Everyone grieves in their own way. But it could be a few days. It could be a couple of weeks. It could even be a few months, right? But eventually, you're going to look back and be thinking about the good memories, that times that you had with the dog, right? If I'm not healthy, that time span doesn't reduce the strength of those emotions that I'm feeling, right? So 6 months down the line, I'm still absolutely gutted and in tears, and I can't manage having lost the dog, right? So there's a difference there. It's not the short-term intensity, it's the long-term intensity that's the issue, right? And if I'm healthy, I regain this sense of well-being, and if I'm unhealthy, then I don't go back to well-being. And so it's indicative of some disturbance psychologically, all right? So, this data's a little bit out of date. I don't think the picture has improved, and right now there are lots of reports that the picture is deteriorating quite rapidly. People are really struggling with this, not just with the self-isolation and not being able to hug someone, that's bad enough, but I think just the fear of COVID and the uncertainty of COVID, because we don't know, right? I can't tell you you're going to be back in school in January. I wish I could. I hope you are, but I don't know. Makes me feel very uncomfortable, right? As I said, I'm a planner. I like to know exactly. Right? So, about 1 in 10 adults in America report experiencing frequent mental distress. So that means 14 or more days, 2 weeks or more in the previous month. Okay. Often, alcohol dependence and depression are the most common psychological disturbances that occur within that time, right? And many mental health issues are manageable and treatable, and yet what the data shows is that less than 50% of these adults are looking for help and trying to get help, right? One of the things we have to remember that I think is important, and I'll share some more experiences in a minute because you guys aren't sharing, so you're going to have to listen to me. You have to remember that when someone is mentally unwell, that there's an element of chemical imbalance in the brain, that there's alterations to the normal chemical pathways and the environment within the brain. So you have to understand it's not something that they're in control of, okay? The worst thing you can do, let me tell you, is to tell them to pull their boots up and get on with it, right? That does not help at all. Makes things worse, in my view, all right? Something that's really dramatic like schizophrenia or bipolar disorder tends to run in families that has a stronger genetic component, but doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to get it because it's in the family, or that you won't be able to manage it because it's in the family, right? And then personal experiences or things in the environment can often trigger an individual's abnormal psychological response, all right? So let's think a little bit more about this idea of it being treatable, and yet many, many people don't go and ask for help because it's seen as not acceptable, right? It's not like having a cold or having the measles or having the flu, right? Somehow your mental health is less you're less willing to admit that you're mentally unwell than being physically unwell is not a problem, right? No one tries to deal with flu without getting help from the doctor, right? So it's a big issue because, as I said, it is quite treatable, okay? So treatment can involve multiple variables to help. Often individuals will respond very well to treatment. So it could be getting some counseling by someone who's qualified, right? Not your best mate, okay? Gotta be someone who's qualified. It may involve some kind of group therapy, depending on what the problem is. Or it could involve special medications, right? CBT is cognitive behavioral therapy that can often help with people who get very anxious or who have anger control issues or depression that they can identify with a particular context, because CBT will give you another response to that context, right? And that's quite an interesting way to approach the problem. Medication can be used to correct neurotransmitter imbalance in the brain, right? Or it could be a combination of these, right, to manage the problem. So I see a counselor, right? I told you at the beginning of the semester, I have mental health issues. And that's just, you know, it's, if I look back over my life, they probably started a lot earlier than I recognized them. So I see my counselor every 2 weeks. I take 2 types of medication to stabilize my anxiety and depression and to help me sleep better, because otherwise I'm up all night worrying about stuff, right? And I have to see a psychiatrist once every 6 months to renew my medications, because you can't just go get them, right? So, you know, it's hard work, actually, staying on top of it and managing it, right? But it's doable because it got to a point where I couldn't ignore it anymore and I had to get help, right? It was like, okay, I'm either going to just lay in bed for the rest of my life, or I'm going to go and get help and get on with my life, right? So it's certainly manageable for most people, right? I had a really good friend in college who had bipolar disorder, as long as she took her medication, most of the time she could manage her bipolar disorder. If she decided not to take her medication, ooh, life got bad very quickly, right? And we'd have to intervene and get her to take her medication, right? But there are many, many ways of managing this. And then you add exercise into the mix as well. So I have to make sure that I exercise every day, and it's manageable, right? Some days are worse than others. It's not like every day is roses and chocolate. I've just listed here some of the disorders that they talk about in the book. So if there's one in particular that you're interested in, you can go and look that up. Okay? And then the last little bit I want to highlight is the information on suicide. I've had a couple of students attempt suicide in the 14 years I've been here. Luckily, they were not successful. And they were found and got to the hospital in time. But as I said, the numbers of suicides on campuses, people your age, across America is disturbingly high, right? Suicide's not a psychological disorder, but it can be the outcome of a psychological problem, depression or anxiety, something like that, all right? So oftentimes it's a feeling of being so overwhelmed there is no way out, right? There's no way to solve the problem. I can't see any way to change this situation, right? It can be as a result of abusing certain drugs, particularly alcohol. The suicide rate in the US has increased by about 24–25% in the past 15 years. So it's on the rise because people feel hopeless, right? It's difficult to get a job these days. It's difficult to earn enough money if you have a job to look after your family well, right? It's difficult to pay for health insurance. I mean, it's difficult, right? So the problems are increasing more than decreasing. Now, 2015, so this is your age group, remember, from 15 to 34, suicide was the second leading cause of death for that age group, okay? Males who attempt suicide are 4 times more likely to succeed in committing suicide than females. So in my experience, my students were both female. It's not that the females don't attempt suicide, but they're less likely to succeed. So they're more likely to attempt it than men, but they're less likely to succeed in actually killing themselves. So it's a really sad situation, right? So who's at risk then? Because this is a key. Can we prevent it? Can we intervene before it happens? Can we recognize that someone is on the verge? Often they've been very depressed for a period of time, right? And that may or may not include some form of substance abuse. They often indicate what they call suicide ideation. So they think about committing suicide quite a lot. Sometimes they communicate that idea to people, all right? You know, there is a difference between suicide ideation and then actually taking that step, right? But still, if someone's thinking about death and thinking about suicide might be the way out, then we have to highlight them as at risk, right? They may have tried suicide in the past. They might have lost a parent or a sibling and they're not managing, you know, there's a grief developmental process and they get stuck and they can't process that grief and it just sits with them all the time, right? Any sign that you see, any sign, doesn't matter how small or how inconsequential it may seem, is serious, and you should take it serious and try to get help, right? And it's easy to say, well, it isn't my business, right? If they want help, then they have to go and get help. But once we get to this is a bit different, right? I mean, they may not be able to get help. Even if they recognize they need it, they may not be able to get help, right? And you may be the person that saves their life because of intervening and calling a counselor and getting someone to come and help them. So again, you know, look carefully at this chapter. There's all kinds of useful information in there. You know, as I said, this table gives you warnings, some other warning signs. There's a 24-hour, 7-day-a-week helpline that you can call. ENMU's link has a helpline and all kinds of information that you could use, right? Don't stand back if you think someone's in trouble, because worst case scenario, and that person is dead, they're not feeling anything anymore. How are you gonna feel when you know you could have done something but you thought they weren't very serious about what they were saying, and now it's too late? Okay? So, yeah, bit of a downer, I'm sorry, this lecture, but I think it's really important. We have to look out for one another, and this situation we're in right now is just an ongoing nightmare for some people, right? And I think we just have to keep our eyes and ears open and take care of one another, right? Because taking care of them is also taking care of yourself. And that's the key. That's what we're trying to learn this semester, is what can I do to take better care of myself? Okay. Questions? Comments? Concerns? Wishing I hadn't said anything today. Is anybody sitting there going, oh, I didn't want to hear this? We might have the opportunity, I got to do some more research on it. Out of the Darkness is a group that raises money and awareness of suicide and suicide prevention. Usually there's a walk up in Clovis and one here on campus, but obviously everything's virtual and slightly different this year. So I've got to find out how they're expecting to do it. I think what they're thinking is setting a day and a time and asking people to go walk at that time and day and maybe take a bit of film or something like that. It's a really good organization. The last walk I did up in Clovis, actually one of the students who had tried to commit suicide came and joined me, which was amazing. It was really, it was just a lovely day. I was so thankful and grateful that she had failed in her attempt. It was lovely. And there are, hundreds and hundreds of people there. One woman lost her husband and her son within 6 months to suicide. People tell their stories and share stories, and it's a big problem, and it's really sad for the people left behind. So, let's try to be a little bit more aware and more honest with ourselves about our mental health. It's okay not to be okay. I love that saying. It's okay not to be okay, and it's okay to admit I'm not okay. All right? And if any of you need to talk, you can call me, or you can call the counseling center. All right? Take care of yourselves. This time is rough for everybody. All right? Questions? God, it's freezing. It's freezing. Whew. Okay, I'm going to go home and make a nice hot cup of tea then. All right? I will see you on Friday. I'm really looking forward to this. When we do it in the dance room and we're all trying this out, it's a cool session. So I'm not sure, as I said, what Chief Malden has planned for Friday, but jump in and watch. We're also going to video the session because I'm not sure how much of it you'll be able to see on this camera. So we're going to video it as well and make sure that it's available on YouTube for you in case there's techniques and things he's going to show us that you want to be able to see and practice. Okay? All right. Bye.